All right, so chapter 6 and 7, we get into the discussion of the major statistics that we use to gauge economic health. Now, part of our job as macroeconomists is to make policy recommendations. For policy recommendations to be made, we need data, we need information, we need to take a temperature check, we need to look at the blood pressure and do all those kind of things you would in a normal physical exam. Here, we're talking about it doing it from the economic perspective. And inflation, if I'm starting off with inflation, you can understand that inflation to me is the single greatest threat to the economy and to economic health, but it is also a necessary evil, everybody wants their wages to go up. You don't want to be stuck in the same kind of job for 20 years with no wage growth, but to inflate your wages would mean that the price of the good or service that you produce would also have to be inflated, would have to go up. So everybody wants, but you have to pay attention to how much. And the Federal Reserve had as its original mission to keep inflation under control. And that's all it did, because the Weimar Germany example of blowing an economy up when there was too much money in the system. Yeah, that's the case. We have that. Yeah. So okay, so we're going to start with inflation. You can download the PowerPoint to your own, the inflation PowerPoint from the Canvas page to your own system, or open it up through the Canvas system. Sometimes I've had some questions. Students last year couldn't access that through the Canvas system. It didn't load it properly. So they just downloaded it, download it to your computer and then bring it up. So if you want to pause me talking right now and get to that, fine. I will do the same. Now understand this, in a market economy, that's all decided by the market. I mean, the prices go up because there's either demand or supply issues that have to get thrown in there and figured out. But in a command economy, there was no inflation. There was no inflation in the Soviet Union because wages were controlled and prices were controlled. Now that doesn't respond well. I mean, our thinking is market has to drive that, but in the command system, no inflation, no need to have it. All right, so let's go to the share screen here and bring up the PowerPoint. Okay, enough of that funny stuff. Okay, so again, we're talking about inflation here, and we need to talk about it as economic sweat. Inflation is a sign of economic activity. All right, sweat is a good thing. Sweat is your body trying to cool down. Your sweat is your body trying to regulate to the heightened sense of activity. And we don't want an economy that's completely moribund. We don't want an economy that's completely frozen. We want an economy that's constantly kind of churning up. But the problem here is, again, managing it to a point where you can control the beast, because the beast will turn around and bite you and eat you, consume you if you can. Inflation ruins your ability to purchase goods and services. So it makes saving money worthless, as an exercise. So we keep this in mind, that sweat is a good thing, that a certain degree of sweat and stress is a good thing. Then you can kind of get past the natural inclination to decide that all inflation's evil. Like I said, everybody wants their wages to go up, but if prices don't go up to accommodate them, then we're going to cut back jobs to do that. So consider that. All right, so now we get to the economic sweat, and we have to talk about the types of inflation here. Demand pull inflation is the most common. That is a right shift of the aggregate demand curve, as we'll see in the graph. But when it comes to single products, you look at it and say, really, do I have to be the first in line? Do I have to get it on day one? Do I have to, stand, or should I wait a month and then the prices come down because they have produced too many of these things? That's up to you. I mean, realistically, demand pull inflation could be very short term, very trendy. Now, as an individual, you are asked if you can wait it out. Can you substitute for a particular product while that product prices go crazy? You can substitute something else. Fine. Can you sit down and avoid it? Do you really need to get involved in it? And it's usually not permanent. And again, the idea here of using ticket scalping as a way to look at inflation, if there's a strong demand for something that's a limited quantity, a concert, a sporting event, if there is incredible demand and the promoters of the concerts don't want to put together a second show or a third show, those tickets will sell out fast. And the resale market, the ticket scalpers, on eBay or in StubHub, or standing out in front of the concert venue before the show starts, are going to get a lot of money for them. Now, as an economy, demand pull usually comes from too much money. People got paid. Perhaps it's bonus check time. People are making more money on their investments. They feel really good about it. That's the wealth effect issue we addressed in the big PowerPoint. But that's the economy as a whole, the AD line, all moving because everybody's getting paid. Now, if only rich people get rich, the demand curve will spike a little bit. Maybe it'll shift a little bit. But if everybody's getting better jobs, if the minimum wage goes up for everybody, and if the kind of spin-off effects, if you make a $15 minimum wage, what about the people who are already making $15 an hour? They're going to demand $18 an hour. So that could, lead to further increases in money, which would then kick the demand out and it'll drive the price up. So demand pull inflation is consumption driven. It's like, we got to buy it. We got to buy it. We got to buy it. We got to burn our credit cards. We got to go out and buy it on the first day. Watch the price. I mean, any of you who have done eBay auctions knows if you purchased stuff that the more bidders there are in it, the more demand there is, the more chance you have that price going crazy. All right, so here's our graph, and as you can see, we're at the beginning point here on this graph is the point where P1 and the quantity, which I didn't draw this graph, so don't yell at me for not putting Q on the bottom there. Output the intersection there at P1 at AD line 1, AD1. Now suddenly swings to 82, and you can see that there's no shift in the supply curve. The producers are producing, they're loving it, they're getting more money for their product. At P2, consumers are still purchasing it. So a demand pull inflation spike in the short run gives suppliers an opportunity to clear some inventory out. It gives them an opportunity to not have to sale price, promote, or package up their product with other things. They can just sell it as is, and they can sell it to whoever else in the supply chain, the wholesalers or the retailers directly, or you directly. They can sell it at the high price. They don't have to discount it, and they're happy with it for the short run. They're just, they're making more money on it, so they should be happy. Now, again, this is the consumers driving the price up by demanding more. Okay, suppliers aren't doing anything special here in the short run. Now, as the price keeps going up, more and more companies could then enter that market if they can do it quickly and efficiently and put more product in there to kind of piggyback off of the original suppliers. But it will get to a point where the market will get saturated with product. Consumers are going to dry up. There are not as many consumers buying it, and the line will come back down. That's why even with the macro economy, an aggregate demand spike could be seasonal. It could be a few months. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is long-term. If it's a long-term, then we're talking about a whole new set of things where the suppliers are going to have to resupply. They're going to have to increase their inventories. They're going to have to hire more workers. And that will kick the supply curve leftward and raise the price even more. But there is a point at which the price will go up and consumers will stop buying. Now, in microeconomics, you learn about elasticity, that if price goes up, there's usually a commensurate kind of decrease in demand. Most cases, unless it's a necessity, unless it is something that you can't substitute for. Like if the price of gasoline goes up to $4 or $5 a gallon, you can get a reduction in the demand for gasoline up to a point, but you still have to drive. And if you drive for a living, whether you're an Uber driver or a truck driver, driving long haul loads, you're still going to have to buy it. Okay, so that you can't get away from it completely. So short run, this works. Long run, we have some stresses that we have to worry about. Second part of inflation here is cost push. Now, if you're the Federal Reserve, demand pull, you could just leave it alone for a while. Or if you see that as a constant process, you might want to raise interest rates to kind of cool things off as an open market response. But in this case, cost push is something that you have no control over. The Federal Reserve cannot tell the oil producing nations of the Middle East to lower prices. They cannot tell the producers of cotton, corn, orange juice, or whatever, that you think of something big in the economy as an input cost that would go crazy up. Now, obviously, petroleum, natural gas, copper, steel, big things. Usually, though, oil and corn would be the two things I would point to as being so pervasive in the economy that a sudden price hike in the cost of these raw materials would drive all products up. Okay, so input costs, you look at there, again, you look at labor costs. If you had a mandatory $15 minimum wage come into effect January 1st, 2021, that would do it. Capital borrowing costs, rising interest rates, labor material, raw materials, anything of that sort. And we might call it a cost push, is that you end up paying for it. Companies can only swallow so much of that increase in raw materials or labor. They're going to have to push it along. So one of the very significant arguments against a $15 minimum wage would be is that suddenly your $5 McDonald's Happy Meal is now $7.50. So how happy are you going to be with that? So everything would get pushed along. Now, the danger with cost push is that absent a change in the quantity of raw materials that could be used, different substitute materials that could be used if they're available or not available, if you suddenly create one, that could take the edge off of this. But usually a cost push spike moves the AS curve leftward and it really sticks. It's not temporary. But this is an inflation that, you and I are just going to have to deal with. And there's only so many things we could substitute for. There's only so many workarounds. Sorry, but that's the way it is. Okay, so the first one, the Fed can wait. Policymakers, and even in the fiscal policymakers, can wait. They can not do anything. Or if they see that it might become a long-term thing, they can start ticking up the interest rates to kind of frustrate a few people from buying houses or businesses from making big project investments. That's okay. Cost push, you'd be risking taking action here. You would hope that the foreign markets and the corn crop, for example, would be good, but can't really do much about it. You can respond to it, but it's not necessarily going to work as well as the demand pull. Now, again, if it's something that is so pervasive, it's going to hurt everybody. And that's why the line moves. That's why the AS curve moves leftward. Everybody uses oil. You think about it, jet fuel, diesel fuel, car, gasoline. You've got the use in petrochemical feedstocks for plastics, fertilizers. I mean, all this stuff that's in the petrochemical line. So if the price goes up, everybody takes a hit. Not just your vacation to Mickey Mouse Land. The plane ticket goes up by $100. Vegetables that are delivered to your store from Texas or from Southern California, price goes up because you got to pay the cost along. So again, corn and oil, probably copper, maybe a third one. And I've already talked about copper as a possible third one that I might consider adding to this list of being things that are so pervasive that they could hurt the entire economy. All right, now this is kind of an offshoot of demand pull, but it focuses on the quantity of money. And we do have an equation, and we'll get more into it later when I think you can handle the kind of mental gymnastics when it comes to this equation. But understand this, that if you pump more money into a system, it's got to go someplace. All right, it has to go somewhere. And this is going to tie into the Ferguson article, the Niall Ferguson article that you might read as an assignment tagged to this particular PowerPoint. So, like I said, if you gave everybody $50,000, okay, let's say for the sake of argument that everybody in our class is a small town. We're all the members of a small town. But for some reason, maybe there's a natural resource that we tapped on our land and we made a bunch of money. Okay, great. Everybody in the class gets a check for $50,000. Now, I'm the merchant who runs the general store in town. I sell everything. We don't have a Walmart nearby or Kmart or Target or Sears or anybody like that, but I've got the general store. I sell food, I sell, dry goods, everything there, soft lines, got that. If everybody in my town who shops at my store regularly has a check for $50,000, guess what I'm going to do to the prices in my store? Okay, I'm going to raise them up because you all have, you're all $50,000 richer, and you're going to chase with that money in hand. You're going to blow it like crazy. And in our American economy, the extra money that would be like this kind of found money, if it's a gambling win or an inheritance or something like that, everybody goes crazy with it. Their buying patterns are much different, but it's consistent. It's a mentality that's kind of in America, that if you suddenly had a lot of found money, you would spend it. Now, that quantity of money, if there's not a lot of output there in the economy, and you change that delicate balance between the demand and the supply, if that small town could do it on its own together, we all kind of lived in a perfect peace and harmony situation. But you wouldn't now introduce $50,000 per person. All of a sudden now there's just too much money, and it's going to consume everything in the thing. People will be lining up to buy they'll outbid each other just because they have to have it. They got money. My mom used to say all the time, whenever I had extra money in my pocket when I was working as a retailer fast food manager, that it's burning a hole in your pocket, isn't it? Yeah, it is. You can't save money, can you? Well, I do save money, and I'm religious at that when it comes to saving money, but that extra found money is always good. Now, anytime you had that situation, and again, the Spanish example of the 16th century is really good at this. You can't just flood an economy with money with that. It doesn't have the chance to build up the output that could be used to bleed off some of that energy. So it ends up being like a dog chasing its tail. You're chasing goods and services. All right, so that's the quantity theory of money, and that's why you got to be careful with quantitative easing. Where are you placing that money, and who gets it? Just honestly, just throwing money. I don't mind if the government gives me money, like the Trump COVID rebate that we got in the spring, and if they give another one in the fall, fine, great, yay. But I'll spend it. But just throwing money at a problem like this doesn't necessarily work good. A good cure for everything. Okay, so inflation. So if you look at the rates here, and I just put it through 2005, 2006 time period there, you could see that since 1991, 92, inflation has been relatively calm. You can see how crazy it was, though, before that. You had the first oil spike, which is the big upward shift there in the 73, 75 time period. That's an oil shock. You see the second oil shock, 79 to 81. Boom, another oil shock. You can see a minor oil shock in 90, 91 when Saddam invaded Kuwait. Boom. But you could see that just, it's all over the place. And, you look at that. Inflation rate in 1980, 81 is 14%. 14%. Who's getting a 14% raise? Because if you're not getting a 14% raise, your purchasing power has been diminished by this inflation. You're actually worse off than you were before. Worse. Because the money is now not buying as much. What cost you $1 today now costs you $1.14. So your money is worth less to buy. So you can see that there. Now, if the Fed gets its act together and can kind of maintain that nice little 3 to 4% inflation rate, yeah, the Fed actually has a target rate now post 2007-9 recession at 2%. They wanted inflation at 2%. 2.5, they're okay, but they're starting to worry. But that's how they want to control it. They want to keep the beast tamed. Now, those circumstances at the beginning of this chart are outside of the realm of our handling. I mean, honestly, our support of Israel in the 73 war caused the Arabs to embargo the oil. The Islamic revolution in Iran and the Iran-Iraq war, that caused the second spike. Can we as central bankers do anything about it? Policymakers, foreign policy people can do a little bit to kind of soften that up, but the reality is the Iranians and Iraqis are going to fight each other anyway. What are you going to do? You just pick the right side, hopefully, that wins. Okay, here's some more statistics here. Now, deflation. Deflation. How many people here would love it if the prices for things that they buy on a regular basis go down? Raise your hand. Yeah, you see my hand's not raised? All right, because it's not going to happen. And the problem is that deflation is a potentially worse situation. All right, so you can see here from 2000 to 2001, you can see the percentages in this graph here are what would be considered annualized numbers. That is, if you took that number and you multiplied it by 12, that's what the inflation rate would be for the entire year based on that number. So you can see that by 2006, 7, 8, you can kind of see the pressures starting to build up behind the economy, the housing market bubble and everything that was going wrong at that time. Well, you get into 2008 December, and November and December, you can see that we're really starting to grind to a halt. And then you get that negativity there. Price of oil got up in the summer of 2008. The price of oil was $147 a barrel. By 2009, the middle of 2009, it's less than $40 a barrel. So overall, technically, we did have deflation in 2009, meaning that the price level in the society decreased by a mere 0.34%. Now, the Fed is really worried about that, seriously worried about that, because it's like a downward spiral. You don't know where the last rung of the ladder is, because everybody wants everything to be cheaper. Great, well, yeah, 20% cutback is great. I love a 20% cutback in the price of a new car. Hello, auto worker who made that car. You want to take a 20% pay cut? Oh, no, not me. No, not me. Oh, but you want the price of a car to come down. You want the price of gasoline to come down 20%. You want the price of food to come down 20%. You want the price of college education to come down 20%. Well, are you taking a 20% pay cut? No. It's not happening. Okay? It's not happening. And when you get into that downward spiral, you don't know where the last rung of that ladder is that you're trying to grab onto. Now, in our case, in our society, and I bring this example up, is that we're kind of programmed a little differently perhaps than others, but we're not going to allow that kind of massive price cutting when it comes to jobs or when it comes to raw materials. We're not going to see 20% cuts in wages. You know what we'll see? We'll see a 20% cut in the labor force. So for the sake of argument, everybody in the class, okay, I'm the business owner. I'm like, guys, look, we're having a bad year. I've got to cut prices. There are 25 of you working for me. If every person in this room agrees, every person, not one dissenter, if every person in this room agrees to a 20% pay cut, you all can keep your jobs. Okay? 20% pay cut. Now, your choice, you're voting yes to take the 20% pay cut, or no, I will take my chances that I'm one of the people the boss will keep on after this. Because the other choice is I've got to let half of you go. I have to furlough or cut half of you. Which one will it be? There will always be, out of 25 people in the room, there will at least be 5 or 6 who will say, you know what, under any condition, I'm not taking the pay cut. I can't afford it because I'm living up here. I can't afford it. Even if I stick around, I can't pay my bills if my pay is here when my bills are here. Because Americans don't save money in general. So the reason why we don't get deflation in the American economy, even though this Fed is worried about it, is that we would much rather take our chances like that. And the level in the society, that's why we talk about inflation as the price level on the y-axis. It's not the price specifically, but it's that level, kind of in the swimming pool here, the level that we're comfortable with. And we don't want the water to go down in the swimming pool because you can't dive in, but we'll leave it here and we'll take our chances. So we'll learn to become, leaner, meaner, more efficient with that. So inflation gives us an opportunity to kind of play with it. Now, again, we talk about inflation and deflation. There's also something called disinflation, okay? So we have to be careful. It's kind of like that discussion in physics class. Acceleration is both, going faster as well as going slower, right? Technically, acceleration is any change in speed. Well, in this case, if your inflation rate goes from, let's look at 2000 on this chart, 2000 is 3.38. If it goes from 3.38 to 1.59, well, you can say, wow, inflation's coming down. No, the prices are still inflating. They're just not inflating at the pace that they were 2 years ago, 1 year ago. So that even though that you see 1.59%, you still have inflation. It's not deflation that the number came down over 2 years from 338 to 283 to 159 as the average. Not, but it's disinflation. Okay, so we can do something to kind of create disinflation, but we don't want to create deflation because we don't know where the prices are going to get cut. Okay, we don't know how bad that's going to get and how cutthroat it's going to be. Okay, next major point here, and again, if you want to just kind of, anytime along one of these videos, you want to just pause it and stop and kind of grok everything, that's fine. Now, who gets hurt by unanticipated inflation or unplanned inflation? Yeah, senior citizens are the biggies. I mean, they get a fixed amount of money every month. They get a cost of living adjustment, a COLA or COLA adjustment at the end of every year. But there were time periods like from 2009 until like 2013. My dad, who was receiving Social Security at the time, he didn't get any raise for 3 years, and I think the fourth and the fifth year was like 1%. Yet the price of his pills went up. The price of heating oil goes up. But overall, inflation wasn't that bad, and the cost of living adjustment is based on the CPI, the inflation rate. But you're on a fixed income, you're on a pension, you're only getting so much a month. And if your pension is going up 2%, or your investment portfolio, which is funding your retirement, is going up by 3%, but inflation's 5%, you're losing ground. You are losing money. Okay, and then you got people who lock in particular interest rates on their investments. You buy a bond, you buy a certificate of deposit or CD, you lock in the interest rate. Well, those people who lock in and the inflation rate goes above it, you're losing ground again. If you buy a bond for 4%, you're getting 4% return on the money you lay out for the bond. But if inflation is 5%, you're not making anything in terms of real dollars. So the people who are hurt by this are people who are dealing with unplanned inflation. Now, who anticipates inflation and how do they manipulate it? Yeah, there's a couple of really good examples here, and I really like talking about these examples when I get to this point here. First of all, despite the fact that you think that companies hate labor unions, they should actually embrace labor unions and the whole labor movement, because they will get something so sublimely better than uncertainty, and that is cost certainty. The uncertainty of free agency. Imagine the costs to a school system. If everybody was a free agent every year, there was no tenure, everybody was there, and you had to, as a school district, get good numbers. How many AP students, how many AP 5s, how many 4s. I've been teaching this class for 13 years. I've got 27 years. This is my 27th year of teaching in East Brunswick. Think I can make a lot of money if I go to Old Bridge? Can I make $200,000 a year if I can guarantee the numbers? And that would drive the cost of doing business crazy, because, districts would have to compete with each other for talent because they have to make numbers. You have to have test scores and all that kind of stuff. So companies, on the other hand, they like the idea of a labor contract because they know how much their labor costs are going to go up every year. It's that cost certainty to know that I'm signing a contract with all my labor unions to give 3% raises, and a 4% raise in year 3. So I can budget and I can plan out how much I'm going to, price out my goods and services and how much I'm going to increase or inflate them based on my labor contract. But if labor is a commodity that can change daily, I have no idea how much it's going to cost me to pay people to work for me. And that's kind of craziness. Businesses have to plan ahead. You cannot run a business and wing it. You just can't. You have to, I was a fast food manager. I had to plan out, like, if you expect to do $900 in business between, 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock at night, Well, how much labor are you going to have on? Well, you got to calculate out how many bodies are there. What's the average wage rate of the workers you have, plus your salaried management. There's a kind of constant you could throw in there, and then I have to figure that out, and I have to make it come to a certain number. Now, obviously, laborers who are represented in a union like that idea too, because they know what they're going to get in terms of a raise. There is the problem of potentially a layoff, like that, the whole thing with, 20% pay cut, or I lay you off. Well, in this case, they can't cut your pay because you have a labor contract, so they'll just lay people off. Yeah, you get that. But workers could be stung if they sign that 3-3-4 agreement and inflation ends up being 5, 7, and 9. Who anticipated this one? So I think it's important for the labor union and the management to get together and figure out something that's good for both of them. That way it's one less thing for that business to worry about going forward. So labor unions and companies that are dealing with labor unions appreciate the cost certainty versus an uncertain future when it comes to staffing. Southwest Airlines did a great little thing here. Southwest business model is a unique one, and they've now become one of the top airlines in America. But in around 2000, they were one of these kind of up-and-coming challengers. They were mostly regional airlines that dealt with, their base was in Dallas, Texas. And so, they had a base down in that southern southwest tier. They were not really big east to west across America, but their business model was really keen. They would fly only one type of plane, which was the Boeing 737. So they would have to train their mechanics only on one system. They could buy parts. They could do anything that, one model. It was simple. And they also flew into airports that were not necessarily the main airport, which cut costs. Like, for example, in Dallas, they were still flying into Love Field, which was the old downtown Dallas International Airport before they built Dallas Fort Worth there out, in between Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas. They would fly into Providence, Rhode Island, as opposed to Boston, do something like that. And because they were flying into smaller airports, they could dominate those airports and get cost savings for not having to buy the gate at, for example, at O'Hare Airport. They would fly into Midway, and Midway is a dive. Trust me, I've been there through that airport a couple of times. But what they did was they started accumulating cash. And what they did was they took one of their costs, their input costs, which is gasoline or jet fuel, and they took this cash and they bought 4 years of jet fuel ahead of time. Now, in December of 2002, the war drums are beating about, let's go in and go back after Saddam again. We were already in Afghanistan, so this is, targeting Saddam and his weapons of mass destruction. And Southwest Airlines had this money, and right now oil is at $20 a barrel equivalent, for jet fuel. You just I'll use the crude oil price, $20 a barrel. They went to the suppliers of jet fuel and said, look, we will pay you for our jet fuel needs for the next 4 years. You deliver it when we need it, but here's what we need. Here's what we plan to use. We have all of our charts and graphs and everything done. We're going to give you $25 a barrel for next year, 2003. 2004, we're going to give you 26. 2005, we're going to give you 27. And 2006, we'll give you 28. Let's just, round it off like that. We'll pay up in advance, give you the cash now, and you deliver it when we need it. And the oil companies went, are you crazy? You're going to give us money for 4 years ahead of time? And you're going to pay us above the market rate right now? Market's $20 a barrel. Southwest said, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Great. Everybody signs off on it. They spend that money. Well, guess what happened to the price of oil? In March of 2003, we go marching into Iraq again, and the price of oil goes to $40 a barrel. And will continue to stay above $40 a barrel. And eventually, in 2008, it's going to get to $140 a barrel. So what is Southwest doing? They figured it out ahead of time. They anticipated the inflation. They bought their supplies ahead of time, and they understood the world dynamic. And boom! Now that was brilliant. The problem is they tried to do it again. And in 2008, from December 2007, we're officially in that recession. Now we're starting to kind of wobble, and the price of crude oil kept going up, up, up. And Southwest did another thing. They thought, oh God, this price is going to go even crazier. So they started buying ahead of time again for 2 or 3 years down the road. And the price of oil then after July 1st started collapsing. So they got burned on that case by being a little too smug. But you know, they made a ton of money ahead of time when it came to that 2003, 4, 5, 6 time period. So yeah. So if you're and businesses do this. This is why when you go onto a commodities exchange, you go look at the prices in a commodities exchange. Those prices in a commodities exchange, like the Chicago Board of Trade or the New York Mercantile Exchange, you're seeing contracts executed for delivery for 2 years from now. Why is that? Well, Coca-Cola wants to know the price of their corn syrup that they're going to use to sweeten their Coca-Cola. They want to know what it is. So they'll buy it 2 years ahead of time. They'll buy corn or they'll buy corn syrup, I mean, from whatever deal. I mean, corn might be the basic product, but construction people might want to buy steel or might want to buy copper. You know? So you're buying ahead of time. And corn is used in high fructose corn syrup. It's used in animal feed. It's used in production of ethanol for our gasoline mixture blends. And all that's going on like crazy. Yep, it happens. Okay. Another one here that does great with this is our mortgages and banks. And bankers, you know, if you get your standard mortgage is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. A 30-year fixed rate mortgage, it's like I'm paying the same payment, you know, with except for the taxes going up for 30 years. Inflation's going to make that payment so weak at the end. You know, if I'm paying the same amount, if I'm paying $2,000 a month for the next 30 years, $2,000 today is not the same thing as it's going to be in the year 2050. So what bankers do is they front load the interest. So realistically, the first 15 to 20 years of your mortgage, you're paying every month more of the interest than you are of the actual principal. So I will pause this for a second, and I will going to bring up a mortgage chart, and then I'll come back and I'll reshare the screen here to show you how this works. Just let me okay, sorry about that. I also had to take care of making sure dinner was not boiling over on the stove there, cooking for mashed potatoes. All right, I'm gonna share a mortgage calculator, mortgage payment calculator, to show how the banks don't want to be paid back with dead money or cheaper money. They're, you know, 30 years down the road. So they have anticipated the inflation, and they've anticipated the inflation over time, and they decided to front load the interest ahead of time. So I'm going to share the screen now, and you're going to see this calculator here. All right, so I plugged in just basic numbers here. I plugged in a $100,000 mortgage with an interest rate of 5%, 30 years. And you can see that beginning this year, okay, this year, from right now, going forward, half a year. Let's use 2021, for example, as an example. It's a full year. That I would be paying on that loan $4,900 worth of interest on that $100,000 loan, and only paying $1,500 in principal against the balance of the loan. So if you look at the chart here on this side, you can see the interest payments are in red, which would be all the way up here to $400 plus a month. Principal payments are just over 100, and somewhere in the year 2036, 2037, so 17 years, let's say 16 years, 17 years down the road, is where it starts to reverse, where you actually have more money going toward the principal than it is to the interest. So they always say that what you should do early on in a mortgage is to add a couple $100 every month and cut that down, because the interest is calculated and reset every month based on the balance of the principal. So if you could throw a $20,000 payment here as a chunk payment against the principal of the balance of the loan, you could see the interest rate will go, and then you would really advance a lot faster. But this is what the basically after 2021, that loan balance has only been dropped by the actual balance of the loan itself down to 97,758. So you only paid $2,000, and $240 toward that loan. See, and that's the banks. They're smart. They're anticipating. And by doing that, they have front-loaded all that interest up. And it's the way houses are purchased. Nobody buys a house with cash these days. You have to finance it. And if you do your standard 30-year fixed rate mortgage because you're a family growing up, 25 years old, going to be there for 30 years, you're going to do that. And this is where, how banks anticipate inflation. Now, again, they're going to build into the inflation premium on any kind of loan. And again, with the mortgage, they're going to do it in a grandiose way. So I'll stop the share there and get back to the PowerPoint here. So we talked about, people who anticipate, and that's, part of it. But the worst case possible scenario here is a combination of inflation and unemployment, which shouldn't happen together, because unemployed people are not spending money. So they shouldn't be generating activity. But what you see with stagflation, and this happened in the 70s, and we didn't know how to deal with it. And like anything else that goes untreated, it gets worse as it went through the 70s. One oil shock, second oil shock. We didn't figure it out. We didn't change our economic behavior. We didn't take the right medicine. But stagflation is, again, unemployment and inflation surging at the same time. And, it's kind of like you're sick. You're shivering, but yet you have a flop sweat. Flop sweat would say fever, but you're cold, and yet you got a flop sweat. It's like, huh? How can I be shivering, cold, and have a fever? How can I be sweating and feel cold? Because, you got both things going at the same time. You've got the coldness of unemployment and the hot of inflation, and you're just going to have to pick and choose your poison here and figure out what you're going to do with it. Because if you attack one, you attack one, you're going to sacrifice the other. It's like kind of starve a cold, feed a fever kind of thing. What do you do? So, if you attack inflation, you want to dampen the economy even more, you're going to have more unemployment because you're chilling the economy out. You're putting it into a medical coma, as it were. But if you attack unemployment, you're pouring gasoline on a fire, because you're putting money into a system that's already inflated, and you want people to demand their way out and end this unemployment by demanding more and more and more. That's going to drive the price level up even further. And again, if you're the central bank, you've got a two-pronged problem on your hands, but you can't attack both at the same time. You have to pick your poison, pick the one you want to attack, and go after it. And that's in the 70s, late 70s, when President Carter appointed Paul Volcker as chairman of the Federal Reserve. He went after inflation. Because again, it's the more devastating part. A fever is much more devastating than the chills. A fever is much more devastating to your body than upset stomach. So he's going to attack that first and go after it. So you just attack it. And again, this is the weird combination. And again, we'll talk about unemployment in the next PowerPoint, but I know this one was rather long, but there's a lot of meat here. So again, if you have questions, you put them on the chapter 6-7 FAQ page, or in this case, chapter 7 FAQ page. I think I might break it up. I don't know, but whatever the FAQ page, you put it on there, and we'll get that answered. But this is all about inflation, folks. Yep, one of the major statistics that we look at. So, all right, off we go.